This week we are still in Kenaz until the 28th, at which point we move into Gebo. We've been sitting with this experience of working with truth, and it's typically been filtered through how body's perception of truth is. We've talked about body doesn't lie, ever. And so there's something really critical about that, about being able to let body lead at this time. And the way that has continuously come through the rune cast has been with regard to personal truth, which I think can be lots of things. I don't think it necessarily has to indicate the same kind of information to everybody. And our experience of that with Kenaz has kind of been maybe coming around corners and realizing places where maybe you didn't know what your truth was in a certain area, in a life area, or perhaps there's a change to how you're sitting with a version of truth in a life area. I can say for myself, there's been sort of a complication of truth in different life areas. What I typically look for with Kenaz, and what has usually been evident with it in past seasonal experiences of it, it brings meaning in such a way that it clarifies something or some things around truth that have needed to be evident to me. And that's not been the case this time. If anything, it has revealed meaning. I understand what I've been given. I understand the truth that's being poked a little bit, but I don't really understand what to do with it. And so I'm curious to see how that plays out in this remaining time with Kenaz. The rune that I draw as the companion modifier to both of these, which I'll talk about Gebo in just a little bit, is Laguz. Laguz is the rune of water. When I work with water, I try to approach it as openly as possible, like within the context of how Old Norse culture would have experienced it, which was usually cold, if not frozen, but also as flow. And I don't attach the emotional aspect to water when I'm working with the runes because that's modern. That's not something that is associated with the Old Norse perspective on the runes. So flow, water with Kenaz for me is like really indicating just kind of getting out of the way of whatever meaningful ahas need to come through this week and not judging them, just sitting with them as an aspect of flow that is happening, bringing my awareness continuously back to sacred flow, and where I need to, reining my actions, my attitude, my thoughts in to be in accordance with sacred flow that is inside me and big capital F flow as well. We don't get into Gebo until the 28th, which is pretty late in the week, and so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Gebo in this rune cast. Gebo is the first point in the Futhark that we realize when we combine our efforts with somebody else, even more amazing stuff happens. It's the first point that we have this experience of interdependence, that when we take care of each other, nobody's worried. That doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that challenging things don't happen. It doesn't mean that we always have all the resources that we need to make it perfectly fine, but it means that we have each other and we have faith that we have each other. We also have faith in, this is a very modern way to express this, but in like pluriversal salary. Like not only have each of the parties involved in this partnership, quite possibly community, contributed to a container that holds everybody in that community, everybody in that relationship, and that container will be there for each person in their moment of need. But the idea of pluriversal, multiversal, universal salary, that is the same concept of having an experience of interdependence. What we need is there because the pluriverse needs us to do what we came here to do. That is where our interrelationality at an extremely high spiritual, energetic level is a real thing. The challenge is finding it in our everyday lives. It's not something that many of us have, or maybe we have it with specific people, but we don't necessarily have it across all aspects of our lives. I find Gebo can be challenging in that regard. It can be emotionally challenging and physically challenging if your needs are not met in specific areas, pretty much on a continuum or even sporadically just not met. I think that this rune actually can bring up a little bit of consternation for some people, and I'm just going to leave that there for this point. Laguz, flow, with regard to Gebo, I still feel is talking to this base truth that we are held. We are in an experience of plenty at a spiritual level, at an energetic level. And the questions that arise are, well, then why don't I feel it? Why aren't my needs met on a daily basis? Why am I stressed and worried and sick all the time? They're really valid questions to ask, and I don't think that asking them negates an experience of pluriversal salary. Both of those things can exist. So we'll see where that tracks as we move deeper into Gebo with the next rune cast. The direction that we're working with, again, is within. This has come up, I guess, pretty frequently over the last, I would say, maybe 4 or 5 rune casts. Within has been the direction that's come up. And I mean, that's pretty significant to me. There's never a lack of opportunity to know who we are inside and to know where we're in relationship with inner earth in that same capacity. And I really have a sense of digging with this experience of within this week. Like, we really need to be willing to excavate. So usually when I talk about within, it's exploring the inner caverns that are already there, inside ourselves, inside inner earth. But I feel like this week it's more about where we need to maybe excavate some caverns that are old and maybe filled in and have information that we need, or there's things that need to be let go of from them, or maybe they're brand new caverns that need to be excavated. That's something to sit with. The season that we are working with this week is summer. Summer, we've talked a lot about summer changing. It is a coming out time. It is a time when we are allowed to re-emerge, re-engage ecosystem, and enjoy being outdoors. But we also have to mind the extremes of summer. The capability for outdoors fun, but also heat exposure, hydration, minding the growth of our ecosystems, and staying mindful of the challenges that our ecosystems are facing that they didn't used to, or not to the depth that they are now. And I guess, for me, where I go is where I am, summer is the most extreme change that we're experiencing with climate change, in that it's hotter and it lasts longer. It starts earlier, but lasts longer. That whole thing has been really challenging to body. It has been a growing challenge for the last, I would say, 3 years in particular. But this expression of summer in particular has been extremely difficult. And I think it's worth asking ourselves, where do we need to be mindful of the challenges that we're feeling because of climate change, because of warming, and what does warming generate for us? I know for me, it's I think in terms of Bikram yoga, which I did years ago, and it can be incredibly catabolically clearing, excavating in its own way. That extreme kind of heat pushes you to places that you wouldn't have ordinarily gone if you were comfortable. So that's kind of the angle that I'm approaching summer with in this week's cast. The element that arises this week is stone, and in this case, this specifically is Baltic amber. Stone is this experience of things getting done but looking still, appearing as if no motion is occurring, no change is happening. When we look at stone that is fixed in the ground, even small stone fixed in the ground, it doesn't really look like it's doing anything, but yet it is resonant with sound. It's picking up minerals, it's depositing minerals into the ground around it. Stone is active all the time, but that's not on our radar. And it's a kind of action that is progressive and takes a longer span of time than human capacity can typically observe. We have to be in really, really tight relationship with the ecosystem to notice what stone is doing. We're talking about long haul relationality with stone. And I feel like that's the expression that's being asked of us this week in terms of like elemental change, the agency that we have. It might be long haul. It might be things that we don't see the results of right away. Whether it's, excavating those caverns or sitting with what our truth needs to further reveal or what meaning around it needs to be further revealed, it might be a long haul activity. It might not be sudden or even timely, and it may not be something that we get to see the outcome of. When I asked what earthly helping spirit was with us this week, I had this really specific felt sense that has been coming to me since early COVID. It's really weird, but bear with me. When I didn't go out a lot, as most of us did not in early COVID, and when I did reemerge, it was like most of us to try to get groceries. And so my experience of being out was almost always walking up and down aisles of a grocery store. And I noticed, I still haven't unraveled this, so I noticed that I would get like 2 or 3 aisles into the store, like with my mask on, feeling like I'm in some energetic lead bubble. And a voice that was not my own would say, "Are you going to run?" And it was really strange. Not uncommon to hear voices, but this was new. This was not something that I've ever felt before. And at first I was like, that was strange, and I just chalked it up as being atmospheric. But then it started happening every time I went into any public space. "Are you going to run?" And I eventually noticed it did become my voice. And so I was like, okay, we've had some transference of something here. Something atmospheric is now part of me. And sitting with what that means, like, is it fear-based? Is it, I just need movement because I'm going stir crazy, particularly during that time? And what am I running from? What am I running to? Like, and the question of who the voice was eventually just went away because the concept of running became enormous. And that is the energy that spoke when I asked who the earthly helping spirit is for this week's Runecast. And the only visual representation that I could find of it is this coyote foot bone, but it was very clear that it's not about the coyote. It's about running and about the structures we need in place to be able to move when it's time to move. And I asked to be really clear on, is this about movement? Is it about motion? And I got a yes on that, but it wasn't dancing. It wasn't walking. So there's a sense of urgency around this. And I question running because I doubt very seriously that at any point here forward in my life, am I going to pick up running again? I used to run, but I don't think that's going to happen at this point. And so I'm like, okay, what are we really talking about here? And the answer that I got to that today was how we engage our ecosystem and space around us differently when we're in motion as opposed to standing still is relevant to how we upgrade our energy to what's happening on the planet right now. So I don't think it's necessarily this fear-based thing. I'm not saying that it has to be without fear. It's okay if you think of running and fear comes up. But I do think holding that a little bit wider and asking some questions around, if I'm in motion, how do I notice my life force moving differently in my body? If I'm in quick, urgent motion, whether it's just your hands or just your feet or some jumping jacks or whatever, how do you notice the relationship between the life force in your body being different with the life force around you compared to how it felt before you did the urgent movement? I think that's what we're really talking about. And I think so many of us, myself absolutely included, coming out of COVID, have become more restrictive in our physicality and have had to from illness. But there's this sense of, we've always had this cultural sense of speed up, but you should rest. You got to hurry up, but you need to chill. This sort of oxymoron of be productive, hurry up, get stuff done, but wow, you should take better care of yourself, self-care, that whole contradiction. I think there's something in that is paralyzing. And that paralysis is detrimental to what we are being asked to shift in our truths right now. We can't be paralyzed and accomplish what we need to with the aha moment of Kenaz right now. So if it takes some weird hand gestures, some running in place, some jumping jacks, or some really weird, crazy dancing that is not the flowy, ebby kind, but like really trying to zhuzh up your life force in your body to move differently, you don't have to know what the life force needs to be moving like. All you have to do is change it and sense the change. That's all that's being asked. And by incorporating that as a sort of ritual for the time being, maybe if only for this week, to start noticing what does change as a result of doing that. And I'm not talking even 5 minutes, I'm talking like 30 seconds. That experience of really shifting how your autonomic sensors are picking up on things, how your energy is flowing, and what does that tell you? What do you get from that? And of course, be careful. The Galder that we're working with this week is Kenaz, Kena, Kaun, Kauna, Kane, Kena, and then Laguz, La, Lag, Lagu, Law, Log, Lagu. And with Gebo, we have Ge, Gebo, Ge, Gebo, Gif, Gifu. And I've talked about this before, but when we do have a rune cast where we're really talking about a transition between these two runes, this is not a 3-rune Galder. This is this rune and this rune as a Galder, and this rune, then this rune as a Galder, separately. And unless my body energy says we're ready to shift out of the current half-month rune, you can go ahead and Galder this one. That's the only time that I use that Galder. I don't go ahead and do this one just because it came up in the spread. I wait until the timing of my body says, yes, you're ready for this. And sometimes it does say it early. Sometimes it does put that forward ahead of when the actual shift is away from the current half-month rune. Right now, I am all Kenaz, and I can't say that I'm enjoying it, but I am getting the memo. The Galder for me is can I lagu, 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 can I lagu. There was a really huge emphasis on needing to speed up, which I think again is it's partly that run energy that is saying you got to zhuzh this up, you've got to change it. I didn't feel like that was specifically requiring emotion to go with it. It could have, but for me that felt like two separate things. Like doing this Galder and doing some sort of like make my energy run exercise was two different things. And the Galder was more about letting my mind go, letting go of the habit of what I plan and want to experience the Galder as, and let it be what it actually just is and needs to be in relationality for this moment. I would love to hear what this rune cast brings up for you, and I hope y'all are doing well.